On to the other guy, Tom, who we've been really, really closely monitoring, Austin Ekeler, and he looks like he's going to play this week. He's saying 99%. What do you think? Do you agree with that evaluation?
Well, let's remember he's dealing with the high ankle sprain from week 1. Running backs average missing 2.5 games, a wide spectrum, though, of 0 to 6 games. This will be the 5th week after his injury. It'll end up being about 3 games that he missed because they had the bye week in there. And that's a reasonable time frame to be close to 100% to return from this injury. If we look at the video, I mean, you can never truly tell severity from the video, but his didn't look nearly as bad as the guy who we'll talk about next, Saquon Barkley's, did. So 4 or 5 weeks is certainly enough time for Ekeler to be healed enough that he can be productive. The stability is what we're always talking about with these high ankle sprains. That can be an issue, but it doesn't appear to be an issue at this point if he's that confident that he's going to play. And we know he was pushing to play the week before the bye week. The interesting thing here is, troubling as a high ankle sprain can be, which it certainly can be, running backs on average don't see a dip in fantasy production when they return. And nearly 50% of those, and this is a sample size of 26, so a pretty decent sample size, nearly 50% of them pick up right where they left off from a fantasy production. So I'm totally cool with starting Austin Ekeler this week. We know who he is. We know how prolific he can be in this offense. You're definitely starting him this week.
I just miss him. And looking back, I thought he played like week 2 or 3, but like you said, yeah, he hasn't played since week 1 where he went off for 24.4 half-point fantasy points. So if he's in, you play him. I miss Austin Ekeler. He's just, I don't even have him anywhere except my one-on-one league, but he's just a wholesome dude, and I tend to root for him. So hopefully he is back this week to help that. And also, I just realized as well, Tom, they do play Monday. So that would be, I mean, you have to line up options, of course, in that case. You know, we always talk to you guys about that, having a plan, you know, whether it's Joshua Kelly or whether it's somebody else, but just have a plan. But he does get that extra day. Hoping to see him back this week. Tom, the Giants continue to embarrass us, me, anybody from the tri-state area that wears the color blue. It's been horrible. Is there any good news? Are we getting Barkley back? Has that ankle sprain, is high ankle sprain, right, Tom, that he's missed the 3 games for?
Correct. Overall for the team, I don't know that there's much good news to give other than that Saquon is continuing to practice in a limited capacity, which he's been doing the past 2 weeks and has not played the last 2 games. So, like we just talked about Ekeler, how I feel pretty good about him. I am less bullish on Barkley. His injury looked worse. Again, can only make so much of what the video shows, but it looked a lot worse than Ekeler's. And today in some videos in practice, he's rocking a heavy tape job on that ankle. So again, high ankle sprains becomes a stability issue a lot of times. When the ankle's unstable, it can't push off when you're cutting so much. So the tape job is artificially creating some stability, which can be effective, but it's not the same as having true natural stability from the ankle itself. And also, if we're thinking from a game standpoint, as the game goes on, that tape wears down and becomes less stable. And that's not necessarily a problem because they can just get it retaped up. But how heavily taped he was makes me a little hesitant of his percentage of health at this point. If he plays, though, which he may, we'll keep monitoring throughout the week. Again, these running backs on average don't see a dip in fantasy production. I think this is a case where he would compared to his baseline, but his baseline is still enough that if he sees a 10, 20, 30% dip, he's still better than whoever else you have. Plus, just the fact that he catches the ball, targets are more profitable, if you will, than carries. You still have to start him in your redraft and dynasty leagues. I would not touch him in daily, though.
I'm not going anywhere near him. I mean, I've been a big advocate to sell Saquon Barkley, not just because he got hurt, but it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I told you to sell him, and I'm still just not into, I mean, of course, if I have him, I'm going to play him, but it's just the Giants as a whole. Like, they just continue to invent ways to do dumb things. Like, giving the ball to Eric Gray last week 12 times for a whopping 25 yards. I mean, what are we doing? I mean, not that Breida's much better, 9 for 21, but this is just why Barkley still scares me. Barkley is exponentially better than these guys, of course. How much better with this ankle sprain, high ankle sprain wrapped up, I don't know. But, if he does play this week, which, again, we don't really know, they're going to be playing. I mean, they're playing the Bills. They're going to be getting their asses kicked all game. They're going to have to throw, which could help him in the throwing game. But even this offensive line, man, they can't create gaps. Would they draft 3 offensive linemen last year? They still can't do anything. They're just a mess. So, I mean, listen, if you have Barkley, you suck it up and play him. I'm just not expecting much. And I agree with you, Tom, sitting him for DFS. And one thing that was promising, we'll talk a little bit later about Darren Waller. At least he was finally involved. Tom, what did I say last week? He was taking like a 4-week nap or something like that. Whatever I said.
Something like that.
I mean, he at least had a decent game, 11 targets. He was 8 for 86. But again, the Giants, they're frustrating. And, Barkley still does scare me to be a big producer this week and really for the rest of the season. This one hurts me, Tom, because I was so thin at running back. And then I lost, who hasn't been great, but I still lost Khalil Herbert. And it's a high ankle sprain. It says he should miss multiple weeks. It blew my mind. I don't know if you watched this game, Tom. Guy came back on the field. I don't know if you saw that. He got hurt, came back on the field, collapsed behind the line of scrimmage. And I was like, yeah, he's back on the field. And then he fell. I'm like, yeah, I'm screwed. So what am I looking at, Tom, with Khalil Herbert?
So, Joe, quiz for you. What did I say for both Ekeler and Barkley is the problem with high ankle sprains?
Flexibility and stability.
Yes, stability. We saw that firsthand with Khalil Herbert. When he came back into the game, tried cutting off that ankle, went right to the ground because he didn't have the power to push off that ankle. And the mechanism of injury I watched, I was like, oh, that's a high ankle sprain. Clear as day. Couldn't believe that he went back in. And sure enough, one play, he was like, nope, can't do it. And they had to run with their fullback the rest of the game because Roshan Johnson had a concussion.
Yes, and Travis Homer was hurt too. Yeah, they were just getting Kari Blossingame or something is his name. I was like, who is this now?
Cool name. But again, running backs average missing 2.5 games, spectrum of 0 to 6. Does not sound like Herbert's on track to play this week. And this is, again, like we talked about with Ekeler. Ekeler's had adequate time to heal. This is the type of injury that if you give them time to heal, they should be okay as long as that stability is able to be regained. This team's not very good, so I personally don't think they need to rush him back. I'm sure they still think they need to win, so they need to get their best players on the field. But hopefully they give him the time he needs to recover so he can be effective again in a few weeks.
And this Herbert injury, to the naked eye, it looked really bad at first. His whole leg was snapped back. I mean, I'm almost grateful for him and for everyone that it is just a high ankle sprain. But yeah, we'll see, man. I mean, listen, the Bears have been terrible, but they did finally have an offensive explosion last week. They've been really bad. If you had DJ Moore, shout out to you. Although I know people with DJ Moore who lost. I know people with Jamar Chase who lost. Fantasy's unpredictable, as we said. But